among us, to lead us, and to guide us as we embark upon this both important and exciting time. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Okay. First of all, thank you all. It's another beautiful Saturday. All we got to do is schedule a vestry event on a Saturday, and it's gorgeous. We're 2 for 2 now. I just want to share something from my personal life. On Palm Sunday, my mom came to church. She was excited. She enjoyed it. Sue brought her in and brought her out. And then on that Wednesday, she had a setback, and she could not lift her arms up past here, and she couldn't really interact with us too well, couldn't stay awake, and extremely achy and painy. On Monday, Thursday night, we got her into New Hanover for a checkup, and they ran tests for everything from pneumonia to a TIA and everything in between, UTI, everything. And all the tests came back without any results to be worried about. So we got her back into Southport rehab, and on, what's today, Saturday, Thursday, I think it was, hospice has entered in. And as of yesterday, we were told by hospice that she's no longer eating and drinking very little. So I say all that to share with you that I'm kind of here, but I'm not here. You know, I'm here physically, but my mind kind of goes back and forth, so I'm really relying upon the staff and the leadership to make things happen at this point in time. If this was Sue's parents, and you know they're in Texas, we would probably already be there. I don't expect, if things continue the dramatic decline that we're seeing, I don't expect her to be awake for more than another week. And then, you know, the transition begins. So, that being said, I'm going to leave at about 11 o'clock or so. We want to get over to the facility and watch the whole lunch hour thing and see if she is awake enough, if she's trying to eat, if we're trying to feed her, if we need to feed her, what's going on, and learn more then. So, Ken Jim's going to do the entire presentation today. I was scheduled to do some of it, but I have bowed out, and he has politely picked that up. And Bill will take care of the business part that takes place after we're done with the strategic planning. So I thank you for your indulgence. Please keep my mom and us in your prayers. And you know, haphazardly, I'll be here, I won't, and I'll keep the wardens informed on what's happening. I think that's about all I've got to say about that. Any questions? Yeah,
sorry to hear about your mom. Just a procedural thing for this particular meeting. Is this a decision-making meeting here? And to what extent are the decisions yours, or certainly your input, but the ultimate decision, and just how do we proceed?
I think Jim's going to get into that, but my understanding is this is a presentation. Each of you are going to present 3 strategies that you have learned about, read about, discovered, and feel like they could apply to our parish, and then we're going to enter into a SWOT analysis. So I don't think there's a whole lot of determination to be made today. It's presentation and receiving and beginning to read about, understand, and digest what's presented. Is that accurate? Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll get Lisa up so she can be that.
So, just to recap where we hope you've been, after the last meeting, you formed pairs of 2 and worked with your partner to come up with what is out there that's being done, what are the big ideas, what are the interesting projects that are being done in the universe called the world. But certainly the Episcopal Church, yes, our diocese, yes, other places outside the diocese, other denominations, lots of different ways that you all came together. I assume that you all have done your work, and we have no way of knowing that because we didn't ask you to, and you didn't report to me or Eric. So what today is about is, today is for each of the dyads, the teams of 2, to teach the rest of us what they learned. We're going to do that in cycles of 15 minutes, of which whatever presentation you want to make to share with us what you've learned, and particularly the 3 recommendations or strategies that you came up with. And to do that, hopefully, in about 10 minutes. Towards that end, I've asked Lisa to be Vanna. And as Vanna, she is going to have a timer, and we're going to allot 15 minutes for each group. So with 6 groups, that's 90 minutes. Okay. We may need to go over on some, we may be under on others. That's fine. You know, it's however long it takes us to do this. But to try and fit your presentations into that. We don't want to get too far down in the weeds. Now you notice in front of you, each of you should have a blue notebook. That blue notebook is going to be your record of everything that gets said. Everything that we talk about today, if some of you have put it in electronically, that's fine. If you have not, somebody gave me this. It's a 4-page presentation. Every bit of data that you collected will go in that blue notebook. There are 6 dividers in each of the notebooks. That stands for one of each of the areas of ministry, so that you can keep a record of what people researched. Because if you're like me, you will not remember everything that everybody said today. Okay. Throughout this planning process, we will keep adding to this notebook. For those of you who are rotating off the vestry at the end of the year, your notebook will be what you give to your successor. Okay, so for as long as we're in the strategic planning process, which should be forever, so as long as we're in that process, we will have a record of where we have been. Why that's important is because, let's say we pick a strategy A, whatever it is, and let's say it gets completed to our satisfaction, or we decide it's a stupid strategy and we want to get rid of it. Either one is possible. Then we will have a record of the research that you've done. That research will be good for a couple of years. When we get back to doing it again, re-upping on this thing, we will have to go back and do exactly what you just did the last month or so. Because things change and new ideas happen. We want to stay current. So is everybody clear about what we're doing and how we're doing it? Any questions? Okey doke. Let's see, what do you got queued up there, Lorraine?
I have facilities and finance environmental scan queued up.
Okay, so why don't we start with the facilities and finance people?
Just to be clear, it's finance and facilities.
Oi. That's our meaning for who are the 2 people who are presenting? Both of you? Yeah. Okay. So they've put this, and by the way, insofar as anybody does anything, if you can do it electronically, that's good, because we can send it to you and then you can put it in your notebook. Anything that is not, that you have hard copies of, you can put in your notebook as well. But if it's just your report and we don't have anything, we need for you to do it electronically so that Lorraine can send it back out to you to put in your notebook. Okay?
Okay, why did that just go? You know what? It hates me. It hates me. It's just went off.
It's still
You
asleep.
broke it.
Thank you, Bill.
Blame finance and facilities. It's a facility thing.
Okay, okay, we're back. The plug came in. Don't touch anything, Lorraine.
It's coming, right?
There it comes. Kind of.
Wow.
Ah, yes, I see it now.
Is there a way to shut just this row off? Oh.
Even more or
More. Yes, I can go back.
back? Is that okay? You want it all the way off?
Looks fine.
It looks like the
Yeah,
entrance
you can
fee.
turn it. You could do it a little bit.
That's your head.
That's good.
Frank, can you still see?
Us, Ed, and Roy.
Dorothy, you're gonna have to move.
Dorothy has to move.
Which way? Oh, I thought it was wrong. Wrong here. Yeah, good.
Yeah, that's good. All right,
Use this table.
next slide, please.
Oh, are we beginning?
We have a beginning.
Bill and I are gonna tag team this. I know we have a time frame here, so we're gonna try to keep it moving right along. This is the way we approach this. We have an approach we went after. We've got demographic data analysis, stakeholder interviews, planning assumptions, and then the proposed strategy. Slide, please. So, Bill, I'm going to roll it over to you. Bill's done some extensive work in looking at what's happening with demographics, growth in the county, and how that impacts the church.
Okay. One of the amazing things that I found when I started to look at this is the amount of data that the church has on every congregation, be it 2 people or 2,000 people. And it's broken down to the church level. These are the numbers that we have for St. Philip's. You'll notice in the period 2021 to, we lost quite a few people, though they came back and were roughly at 668, which shows a reasonable growth, but there's still some losses that we had. The average attendance is an interesting thing. If you look between 21 and 22, there was a significant drop. There are a couple of people that I'm aware of in our congregation that have not come back since COVID. They're still concerned about, some of the possible negative impacts of that. If we look at the pledge, we've shown, I would say, some steady growth. It's a number that up through 22, those are actual numbers. And then when we get to the 23, we have a budgeted amount of $740,000, growing to about $856,000 in the following 4 years. Those are estimates, but we've tracked pretty closely with those numbers through the period. Would you go with the next one, please?
So I did neglect at the beginning to mention our methodology fundamentally was we kind of split it up and conducted research, as Bill indicated, on the demographic data that's out there in the county, state, and the church. And then we also conducted what I would call key stakeholder interviews with all of the personnel within our church that are involved in finance and facilities. So these are the key points. You can read them. Trending positive in terms of our stewardship and our pledges and collection. We're trending very positive on our budget discipline and coordination across the organization. Facilities maintenance is an increasingly challenging task. We're trending positive on how well we document what's going on in the facility and automating facility maintenance to the extent possible so that when someone else takes over, it's not all residing with one person. There's certainly a significant concern about long-term requirements. Should we need capital improvement? Should major repairs be required, or should there be a natural disaster?
I want to add to that, when you look at the situation that we're faced with today, there's a lot of things that need to be done, but there's a lot of tasks or things that, quite frankly, we just don't have the capability to work with. Just around here, with this new building and the office complex coming in, we're really at about the end of, where we have at least physical space to do things, although we can do things like columbarium and that type of thing. But if you look at where we can go from here, we've about we've kind of finalized, the possibilities that we have on the plan today. And I apologize for any mistakes I come up with in the in the wording. That was one thing when I took my fall, I met the marble floor of our bathroom, and it was really hard. So every now and then I don't quite get the words right, but the fact is that we've pushed pretty much to the limit what we have available for space and, you know, things you can do on the campus as it sits today.
This is a very general statement, but it'll come up in conversation. I use the term capacity and utilization increases are anticipated, right? We'll come back to that. Our financial process and budgeting is very strong, but is, I would consider it more operational and year to year than strategic, which future out year focused, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Okay? Planning assumptions. Finance and facilities, somewhat unlike the other dyad studies, is, I would call it a supporting function in that it involves dollars, it involves facilities that are probably going to be needed to meet any objectives of the other dyads, right? So it's a key component for most initiatives. Clearly the church is growing. The capacity of the buildings and the facilities will need to be addressed. I know Father Eric's already talked about this. There's multiple approaches to doing this. And then the strategies that we're going to propose, I would consider them overarching, you know, very, very broad across the church. And frankly, we have two, but they could be divided into smaller ones. Next slide, please. All right, so come down to the meat and potatoes of this. Our proposed strategy, number one, is develop a strategic financial program that expands upon all the good things that we're already doing. This program would consist of 3 separate pillars. The first one is underway now, which is a rigorous and transparent annual stewardship and budgeting process. We're doing that well. The second one is an establishment as well as a growth of a strategic financial reserve, which is a contingency fund for multiple possible things that we might need. We have not attempted to define the size of it, not attempted to define, you know, how fast we get there, but we have identified that as a key pillar in a long-term strategic financial reserve. Next slide, please. And the last one is focus on the growth of the endowment program. I personally learned a lot about endowments by going through this process. I know more than I did before. I'm still nowhere near an expert. Don't know how much you know about it yourself. But this is the most long-term part of this program. It can be funded by individuals directly and from church funds if desired. And over time, what these can do is relieve annual operating expense line items. You get enough in your endowment, then you have the ability to pay for things that would ordinarily at this time come out of a year-to-year budget. Next slide, please. And so here's what you would get out of this. The desired outcomes for this strategy are that it enhances our mid and long-term planning, and then the church would really only need to ask one of 3 things for anybody when it comes to money. Your annual stewardship pledge, your capital fundraising, if that becomes a desire, and then fund the endowments. So what you're trying to eliminate is emergency fundraising requirements for things that pop up that aren't anticipated.
I think one point you need to remember under that capital fundraising, that can be a, you know, we've ended up with a mortgage as a result of this building. And the good news is it's not what we thought it was going to be. It's probably half of what that number was going to be. But it's still sitting out there as an obligation of the church, you know, as we go forward. So you can't ignore it, even though you're not, well, we're not going to put up a new annex out here in the front yard, but we do have to pay down what we've already agreed to pay for.
Strategy 2, conduct a long-term property utilization assessment. What we're talking about here is let's holistically look out of all the things that we may want to do, we may have to do. One thing that's very clear is that we have finite real estate, and there are no adjacent or contiguous, there's no property available to expand in our current location. If you're going to do this, I would contend that nothing is, quote, off the table. That means we look at all options, build, expand, remove, replace, to accommodate priorities that we may find. Right? So this is a very inclusive, long-term approach. Next slide, please. The short-term needs may impact our future plans. So if we decide, for example, that we want to do a columbarium, well, where do you put that? And could that impact a future sanctuary expansion if that was a priority? So the idea here is don't do something until you have an idea what the impact on that might be in the future, having looked at the future. And this could be outsourced or done internally. I don't know enough about real estate to be able to say whether we've got the capability to do it ourselves or if this is something that needs to be done by external experts. Slide, please. And as I mentioned, for desired outcome, and you can read it, the deliberate consideration, review, and prioritization, so that anything that anybody can come up with that we may or may not need in the future is kind of put on the table now so that we don't make mistakes impacting our longer term view. And that'll help us determine if short-term investments and activities are viable in a larger picture. An outcome of that clearly is don't go building something tomorrow that might impact a future plan without at least studying that. Bill, anything else? Those are our two strategic proposals. As I mentioned before, they're somewhat overarching and they are supporting other initiatives by nature.
I think we had some difficulty when we tried to come up with a third outcome, if you will, but the two things we've talked about here really impact the other 5 ministries in the church. It's kind of hard to separate them, but you need to think about that. But
Okay.
that concludes what we had.
All right. Questions? Do you have questions or comments? Do you understand that what we are not doing here is criticizing their conclusions? We're not here to do that. We're just here to learn what they concluded from their research. But I want to make sure you're clear on what they're recommending.
Please. The long-term property utilization assessment sounds like something I thought we'd already be engaged in. Like that's
You know,
and I don't mean to belittle it. It's a great idea. It's such a great idea. I thought we were already doing it.
Well, I would, again, we go back to this idea of the current operational committees and the long-term planning, right? So I would contend that, I'm not trying to put words in their mouth, but the finance and facilities folks are probably doing a lot of things that are slightly shorter term operational.
Okay.
That right there, and I interviewed all of them for this, right? So I don't think anybody would, on that committee, or at least the leadership of that committee would, or ministry board I should say, would disagree with the fact that that's probably a good thing to do and that day to day they're not doing it. So for example, the columbarium, we did not put that down as a strategic initiative, and the reason for that is it's fundamentally in flight, right? It's in the current discussion. And what came up out of that was, where's it gonna go? You know, Bill's talking about it.
Yeah.
Where's it gonna go? Well, if we put it here and we decide to do something else later, oops, we're gonna either have to move it or it's in the way. And so as you talk to people, you'll get the sense that some people may believe we need, you know, more immediate facilities. Some people say we need this. Our point here was simply to say, let's get all of these things out there right up front and understand the interoperability relationships of and impact of each decision.
It's kind of interesting if you go back and look at some of the stuff we were doing back in 2006, 2007. It's this is a repeat of a lot of those kind of things. So people have been thinking about it. We've all been thinking about it, and it's time to, I guess, put things on paper so that we really have those as things we need to consider as we're moving forward with, you know, the various plans that we have over the next 1 to 3 years.
Yeah, the light bulb that came on for me was if I handed out a piece of paper right now to everybody and said, write down what you think we need in the next 10 years for facilities, my guess would be we'd come up with a lot of variants on that. They'd probably be all good ideas, but I don't know that we have a single cohesive strategy or decision.
That says our time
That's
is
the
up.
time.
Yeah, thank you.
I kind of picked up on that.
I would just add one thing, thank you very much for your presentation. One of the things that is now currently happening in the church is a move away from judging the size of a congregation and its growth by average Sunday attendance. One of the things that happened in COVID was we don't know how to count our average Sunday attendance, because I'm not sure if we counted Easter, do we count all the people that streamed the thing, you know, in their home computers? And do we count that as attendance? What's replacing it so far in the conversation is size of staff. That you determine the needs of a church and where it's going by the size of the staff. And is the size of the staff appropriate for the number of people that are on your communicant list?
Is the staff meaning clergy, paid staff, unpaid staff?
It means paid staff. I'm just saying that's out there. It's just another data point for you to have, okay? You may or may not want to do that, and there's not enough data about that out there to compare with all the other churches. So I'm not sure how useful it is until.
Almost like a ratio of paid staff to participants.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the reality is, there are a whole bunch of people who never attend, but if somebody gets sick or there's a funeral, our staff have to respond to it. It's the way of dealing with it. Yes, Bob?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Hey, now, I don't know where this falls in your bailiwick, but do you consider parking at all as a factor?
That's a
I
big
mean,
factor.
that's not a long-term, that's more of a midterm.
No, it's a big factor. I mean, I guess from a long-term perspective, we would have to conclude that parking would be under the facilities utilization, umbrella for a strategy.
Because I've heard people say, well, that's not a problem because we have, we have the parking here at the postal thing, we can have a greater number of services and so forth, but we have to recognize the fact that we're one of 3 churches. They're all going to be growing. And it seems to me that there should be some kind of effort to at least approach the city fathers to find out what they're doing and push them a little bit, because it's a problem for not just churches, but for the businesses here and all that.
And just to add to that, all of the church growth data says you will not grow if you don't have adequate parking. And that's where we may need to get into ecumenical conversations about service times, because otherwise you end up what we used to call car wars.
Yeah, that's why we try to use the term capacity, right, as a very broad statement of all of these things. You have to get people into the building for a certain amount of people times a certain amount of services. All of those are variables.
All right, we need to move on. Thank you. Susan, are you up next?
Without a PowerPoint.
And your partner is Jeff, right?
Yes,
Okay, he's not here.
right,
So you're going to present.
I will.
Susan, would you like the lights back up?
Yes.
That only gives her 7 minutes. doesn't it?
Actually, 7.5.
7.5. Sorry.
I'm gonna stand over here just because I don't like my back to people who I'm talking to. If you don't. Did you bring your lunch or what?
Bring my lunch.
Okay. All right, pastoral care was Jeff and my assignment. Okay, and I would like to have had this lovely slide up here that told you that there's actually a definition in the Episcopal Church for pastoral care. And you can find it on the web, and you'll get this. I'll eventually get this email to you. I don't know why it won't open, because I work on an Apple, and it doesn't like to play with that. Whatever. I think that's why. But according to the Episcopal Dictionary, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but pastoral care is the ministry of caring at the heart of the church's life. And it goes on to talk about ministries of shared presence, listening and support. And it can refer to hospital chaplains, pastoral counselors, therapists, social workers, and other professionals who serve in the name of the church. It includes parish ministries and the clergy and laity. And notice clergy is mentioned way at the end of this, as well as laity, who respond to human needs. So pastoral care is really for everyone. It's giving and receiving at different parts of times of your life. So at St. Philip's right now, one of the things I started doing was looking at a number of churches just to see what they were up to. And so I put all the things that we have across the top of this. Is a really primitive spreadsheet because I used pencil on it. And so we have several initiatives already in pastoral care. Bereavement care, Community of Hope, Daughters of the King, Eucharistic Visitors, Friday men's group, Medical Equipment Lending Library, Prayer Shawl Ministry, Stephen Ministry, and Terabella. So we have a solid foundation on which to build. And when I looked at these other churches, nobody has as much as we do. At least not on their websites. Who knows? They may not have all of that on their website. But we do have a solid foundation on which to build over the next 3 to 5 years. So how did we approach this task? We tried to research Episcopal churches that were mostly our size. And if you don't know about this red book, I learned this from Canon Jim. He said, get the red book. Do y'all know the red book? I think it's every parish in the United States and territories.
And all of the Central and South America.
Yeah, so it tells you a lot of information about size. Now, whether they update their roles, I was wondering about that, because some of these churches have a lot of people in them. But we tried to look at churches that were close to our size. And we stayed mostly in the southeastern United States, just because it's kind of where we live and we would be sort of like them. We also looked locally at the mainline churches, Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, Lutheran. We looked at a few non-denominational churches in the area, and we also reviewed what's happening at the National Episcopal Church level. And you'll get a copy of the spreadsheet eventually when I get it all fixed and pretty, and you'll also get this PowerPoint eventually when we figure out how it can be transmitted. So, luckily, since I anticipated that maybe that wouldn't work, I made a handout for everyone about our findings. Thank you, sir. Okay.
Thank you.
Already punched the holes, very nice.
It pays to work in the office. You know what's like. So narrowing it down, I mean, I looked at probably about 75 different websites or somewhere around there. And then we narrowed it down to about 40 or so that I kept track of on the spreadsheet. And I've narrowed it down to the ones that we felt were doing that exciting work or that work that could possibly be replicated. And one of them was right here in Southport, St. Peter Lutheran Church. We got looking at their website and we had discussion with their members. They have a collaborative team led by the pastor and a parish nurse, excuse me, who's a volunteer. They have their congregation divided into groups that they call flocks. And each group has a leader called a shepherd. And the ability to respond to needs and coordinate care, they can do that through each shepherd leader and meet immediate needs. And they focus on promoting health and wellness for all members. And they seek to unite care for one's mind, body, and spirit. That's actually all on their website. Holy Trinity in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is a bit bigger than we are, I might add. But their labor of love is to support and networking. I don't need to read this all to you. You can see that they have Community of Hope, which we have, which is the hospital chaplaincy. And that's all coordinated by a parish nurse who is paid. And they offer various wellness opportunities, health screenings, and education. And they have on their website a layperson for pastoral care listed in the staff. And I thought that was interesting. And as I looked through the Diocese of East Carolina, I did find that there's actually a process that one can go through to have someone licensed as a pastoral care person. Not necessarily paid, but licensed by the diocese to be offering that to the congregation. St. Andrew's in Greensboro, both of those happen to be in Greensboro. They also have a staff person called a pastoral associate who is a social worker, and I didn't get a hold of them to find out yet if that person is paid. So you begin to see sort of a trend here that there seems to be more help that coordinates everything. Grace Episcopal Church in Paducah, Kentucky has a full-time parish nurse who is a retired RN and receives a travel stipend. You can see the things that she does there. I actually had about an hour and a half phone interview with her. Very interesting. I probably learned more from her about what not to do if you're a parish nurse than I did what a parish nurse actually does. So it was, I have a lot of notes on that which I need to write up and probably include in the book as well. That interview could be a good piece of data. Trinity Methodist Church, right over here across the street. They do have Stephen Ministry. They have a person on their staff that's the visitation pastor, which I found interesting. That person does a lot of the hospital visits, and I believe he is a minister. They are starting a shepherding program, and they're going to train 36 shepherds to watch over small groups. That's what they're up to. Of course, we looked at St. Philip's Church. We had interview and discussion. Jeff and I sat down with Mother Lisa. You can see what the basic ideas there is, that we have that good foundation. Sometimes there can be gaps in care. That was something that we talked about a little bit. That emergency responses seem to be working okay for the most part, and we talked about how to get all ministry boards to become more pastoral with each other, not just job oriented, but maybe working on the, I know in the pastoral care board that I used to sit on as a Stephen minister leader, we would start the pastoral care board meeting by going around the room and checking in with everyone and just seeing how, so things like that. Having groups around topics could be helpful, and we could envision need for additional staffing, either lay or clerical. I don't think I meant to write clerical there, I think I meant clergy, sorry.
Actually, that's how you say it.
That's how you say it.
What?
Clerical is how you say it.
Oh, that's true, okay, good, I won't pretend to. All right, so Jeff went out and had a tour at Generations. And it was very interesting, because I know everyone kind of wants to know what they're up to. And basically, what he came away with, and I wish he was here to tell you about it, but everything about Generations is about those buildings out there on 211. That's the whole purpose, is to attract youth. It's a gymnasium, it's a media center, it's a lot of different things. And he found it very interesting. On the web, you don't really find much about pastoral care the way you do when you look at Episcopal churches or the Methodist Church or other churches. They do have a staff member who's a counselor, and they do organize into small groups for pastoral care. All right, so the next one is Christ Episcopal Church in Charlotte. That is not anywhere near our size. They have over 4,000 members. If you're familiar with Charlotte, Christ Episcopal Church is on Providence Road. And that's where all of the hoity-toity Bank of America people and millionaires live. So it's a different ballgame. The reason that I'm including it here, though, is because on Sunday, a very nice gentleman came up to me and said, "Oh, I see you're the junior warden." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I'm so-and-so. I'm the senior warden at Christ Episcopal Church in Charlotte." They just finished their strategic plan in January. If you go on their website, there is a very nice video of Bill Lorenz and his partner that did their strategic planning. It's worth a listen. I know it's not to be compared to us necessarily, but they get it, and from where they are, they're planning way ahead. They are preparing parishioners for all stages of life. They really had an emphasis on the health of the whole person. The idea being, if you're not sound health and spiritually and physically, that you cannot do the work of God in the church. So they are really dwelling on that. They already had a wellness director. They already had social workers and counselors on staff, and I'm sure they're paid. Their vision is to become the community center for those things, to reach out into their community beyond the parish. So I had to include that just because it felt like kind of a God moment that I ran into the guy, and he said to call him anytime, and we could get more ideas. Of course, we also looked at the Episcopal Church. Again, if you haven't gone to generalconvention.org, very interesting. You can get all of the updates that ever existed that happened at the Baltimore Convention in 2022. The number of adults over 65 years of age doubles by 2050. So that's one thing that they are stressing. Systems of care have been and will continue to be stressed as people seek ways to age positively and ensure ongoing wellness. And they actually, what is that thing called that they make? A resolution. They made a resolution for a task force to be created to help congregations approach these challenges. They'll be reporting back to the executive committee in this year, and then to the General Convention in 2024. Based on all of these things, we have ideas. Now, I get down in the weeds with this. I changed the whole thing yesterday because I thought I was coming up with all the suggestions of what to do, and I think we're really supposed to be just coming up with ideas, so I changed a little bit. But idea number one, out of what we've learned so far, some churches are breaking into small groups organized around causes, interests, or needs in order to increase pastoral care giving and receiving. And again, the idea emerged that in order to serve God and His church, we all need to be nurtured spiritually and at various levels of need. There are times in our lives when we can give pastoral care to people, and there are times in our lives when we need pastoral care. And we, around that idea, would like to see that kind of emerge as something that St. Philip's does really well. Idea number two, many churches are focusing on this positive aging and wellness as an important need for pastoral care. I mentioned several places that have parish nurses or someone who kind of coordinates all that. They might do blood pressure checks every 2 weeks or something like that, or have workshops on different aspects of aging and wellness. And while we were talking about this, Jeff and I sort of had a light bulb at the same time. Some of these things almost overlap into parish life. They sound a little parish lifey, kind of thing, but they could possibly work together. And idea number three is to close gaps in pastoral care and grow new opportunities. And undoubtedly there are more opportunities for us to connect to one another in a pastoral way.
Okay, your time is up, but did everybody understand the data that was presented? Do we have any questions?
I have a comment.
Just asking about the flocks and the shepherds, is that similar to the various ministries we have here? Or is that completely different?
It's a way of organizing people, it's a way of keeping up with people. I guess it's like the umbrella, so that, say we had groups of 30 people in the parish that were on someone's list, and Bill was the shepherd. I don't particularly care for the verbiage of shepherds and flocks, I think that's,
That's a Lutheran thing.
it's, huh?
That's a Lutheran thing.
It is.
I mean, it is, that's terminology
I know.
they use.
But that's just the terminology I'm thinking of. Then Bill checks in with his 30 people on a regular basis and then finds out what their needs are. And he's in closer contact with them than anyone else can be. And then those shepherds then meet on a regular basis with the entire pastoral care team, which includes the Stephen ministers, the Kohai, the Shawl ministry, the Eucharistic visitors, all of those, and they figure out ways that they're going to help people.
Didn't we in the past have neighborhood groups or something where
Yeah.
there were people, and I don't know what happened to that. Second thing was, you mentioned Generations Church. I just had heard of an experience which I thought was pretty interesting. A lady that I know lost her husband just recently. She was a non-practicing Catholic. She had no connection with the church, but on Valentine's Day, she went out to her front yard. There was a balloon and there was a sign there, "The Ninja Warriors from Generations Church. We love you." Now I don't have any idea how they found out that she had this issue. If it was a neighbor, maybe it was looking at the church. I don't know what the reason was. But she was very impressed with that.
Yeah.
And thirdly, was it Beach Road Baptist? They have a similar arrangement. They have what they call deacons, and they've divided the congregation up.
I
And the
did talk
deacon
to
is
them. Okay,
responsible
that's good.
for a group, and must be aware of, physical problems, abilities to get to doctors, storm, maybe somebody has to go help move furniture off their back porch or whatever, the kinds of things that they do.
Yeah, and I have a question along those lines, because a lot of, when I went on websites, when I was first looking at stuff, a lot of churches have like meal ministries and transportation ministries. One of the things that I thought of is, how do you work around model policies with a transportation thing? But I think it's a need that people are having lots of surgeries, and single people, or maybe one's laid up and the other's having surgery. You need a ride, you need somebody to, I don't know. So I don't know if there's a workaround on that.
I talked to the chancellor when we were concerned about this with student ministers.
Right.
We tend to work one-on-one.
Right.
And we came up with the idea that if the family and the person who is being ministered to in the student ministry would sign a release, and the chancellor said, no, that won't work, and that doesn't work. So
Yeah.
basically the idea now is anything we do in church, think two.
Exactly.
Don't think one.
I think so.
Okay, we're ready to move along. Thank you, Susan and Jeff.
Yes.
Okay, Danny, you want to be next?
Jeff's in California, drinking wine, not that I have any resentment about that. I just thought I'd mention it.
We could have brought wine.
There's still time to send someone out. Okay, Dana.
Yeah. I sent to the meeting, so we'll just basically talk about what we had when we can send you the electronic, or we go afterwards. But, well, we work with the parish life group in the church here, and we're looking at what we need to do. We first started looking at what does parish life advertise that they do right now within the church, and looked at other churches as to what they do, and what our focus was primarily, how does parish life work towards help growing our church? That's what we're looking at now. The church is going to grow larger as the population in Brunswick County grows and the developments grow in Brunswick County. What will they, element of that will Parish Life be able to contribute towards growing this church? So we looked at Parish Life. They coordinate events with Southport festivals, provide church tours for the church during historic times, during the 4th of July. And these are things that are on their agenda, things to do. Easter egg hunts are things we used to do, but maybe we'll get into it again in the future. Summer Bible school, something we used to do when we had children here. We used to also coordinate with other churches for summer Bible school. But these are things that are on the Parish Life Ministry Board agenda of things to look into do and getting, having speakers.
Just let me interrupt.
Yeah.
In order to stay near time, because I know how long your presentation is, I think the important thing is to not wait to the end to get to the 3 ideas.
Sure.
Okay, and so, because we can read the data when we send it out. A quick summary of each one, because you've got a bunch.
Yeah. Okay, so looking at other types of churches that Michelle looked at, there was one in Pawleys Island that was during the South Carolina breakup of churches between Anglican and Episcopal. They had one church that their church went Anglican, they wanted to continue to go Episcopal, and what were they doing? Slightly larger church than we are. They have 28 kids that are over 18, around the 18-year group. What type of activities they do within the church themselves. Trinity, we looked at Trinity and found out that one of the things that they had going for them as far as having the size of the church they had is they had the band director at Southport Middle School is a member there, so when they went there, the kids went there too. So that's how the choir program and youth choir is going to continue to grow. We did what's on the website for St. Philip's Church, and we came up with what do we do as far as newcomers within the church itself? What does our Parish Life do as far as newcomers? We had a lot of good programs for newcomers, but when you look at what we're actually doing within the church right now for newcomers, it's kind of based on how many people we can actually get to be active in that program, which is something that we found was kind of we have great ideas, we'd like to do it, we just don't have the people, and that becomes a problem. And that's one of our things that we're looking at into this whole thing is how do we energize and invigorate the church itself, St. Philip's Church, to do the things that we want to do so that we have a presence in the community and a presence within our church to get more people active and invigorated and involved within the church. And that is the main problem that we have. So, one of the ideas we had was to revisit our current newcomers program. This goes back to a strategy we had before with the newcomers that we had. It's interesting. We came up with these great ideas for strategies. We hit the wall of we don't have the people to do that, and those ideas just kind of fade away. So it's a matter now of let's not forget what we've done before, but let's build on that before, and how do we energize the church to be able to get the people to do the things that we thought needed to be done in the first place when the ministry board says, great idea, we just don't have the people. So that is a problem from within the church of how do we get the church to be more active and engaged. If we have as many people as we say we do, we should be able to do more things than we're doing right now. One of the ideas is expand newcomers events. Newcomers get to come in and meet the leadership of the church, but they don't get to meet the rest of the church. We don't have activities within the church that, hey, church, here's newcomers. Now, coming from a military background, we used to have something called hails and farewells. When somebody came into the organization, about once a month we'd have a group gathering, everybody get together and says, here's the new people. Oh, by the way, here's the people that are leaving the organization also, so you can congratulate them on what they did. But it was a esprit de corps type of thing that we try to build up within organizations. And that's something that we're kind of lacking here at St. Philip's Church. So how do we get to engage and integrate and bring people together within the church to make them part of the whole church itself? More exposure to newcomers. One thing we used to have that we don't do anymore is put up pictures of newcomers so that you can say, we have 2 different churches right now. We have an 8 o'clock church, we have a 10 o'clock church. In the summer we're going to have a 9 o'clock at the Intercoastal Waterway. So we have groups that are dispersed throughout the church, but how do we become one unified church? And when you get a unified church, then you become more capable of doing what you need to do. We used to also host gatherings for people that are new to the church, to have them integrate with people. So that's one of the things we wanted to have as a core for the parish life group, is to look towards integrate the people into the church, get them quickly integrated so that we know who they are, what their capabilities are, and then be able to work within the church. And the whole idea here is, if you have a church that's integrated, coordinated, and a community within the church, you'll have a better presence in the outside world, so that this group of people that are coming into Southport will come to St. Philip says, there's an energetic church. There's people that are doing things, going out and working within the community, and therefore they will feel more welcome to come into the church. And once again, once they come into the church, they get integrated quickly within the church. That was basically it. So now you make up time.
Okay, not yet. Are there
Questions?
Yeah, questions?
Dave, could you just kind of say what the top 3 ideas were? I lost them a little bit in the overall conversation.
Oh, get this down. Let's see. Look to work with the, one thing is work with the outreach ministry, or have the ministry boards work together, once again, to become a more unified church. It's not just basically stovepiping ministry boards one after the other. Have all the ministry boards working together with the goal towards making this a unified church, a cohesive church, integrated church of people that are working, not just the 8 o'clock service and the 10 o'clock service and the beach service, but have a unified church that's working together so they have a better presence in the community. When we built the parish hall, one of the things that we've been talking about a long time was, well, when we get this parish hall, we're going to be able to project ourselves into the community. Well, the parish hall is built. So far, I know we've had one thing we've integrated. The Trinity came in and used our parish hall, so they know we have it. But we haven't had something to the community that says, hey, we're here. This is our community. Here is something we can do within the community. If we're not working towards that, at least we haven't done that into the community. So we want to have that type of interaction and projection into the community, so that if you're projecting in the community, people will be more willing to come into the church.
Dan, wouldn't part of the solution of some of the problems you have be to find out what our current congregation's interests, experiences, and skills are?
Yeah, it's been a long-term goal of the church, and there's, I have to go back 15 years almost. And one of the things we try to do is put together a time, talent, and treasure composite of what the church is, and that's always been something the stewardship ministry board or the stewardship committee has taken on to do, but because we've not had that information to be able to provide to us. So if you try to go in now, like I got something just came in that we had something from finance and facility. We finally got somebody who wants to take on plumbing in the church, so I'll get him his information from model policy so he can get a key for the church. But if you've got something, you need to have a database that says, we got these amount of people that used to have maybe this was their vocation and this is their avocation, but you don't know, you don't have something to go to right now and says, I got a problem, I need somebody to fix it. Here's where we go to get that person to tap into them.
I wonder too whether or not if we had that information and that knowledge and was able to consolidate it into some kind of data points, we'd be able to more easily, maybe a factor as to what strategies we actually selected in the far right, because we know where the interests were.
Yeah,
less problem populating that thing.
One thing you don't want to build is a plan on what we used to call unattainment. If you don't have the capabilities, don't build on it.
I sit on the stewardship committee, and one of the things the stewardship committee is doing is trying to get from the boards just simply a list of all of the people who are currently involved and what they're involved in, which we have no list of.
The closest I came to that was on model policies. I have 96 learners right now in model policies, but of those, I have probably about 150 things that was required under model policies. So I have some people that are in 5 different groups under model policies.
Well, that was the thing we wanted to understand is there's a theory and I don't know whether it's right or not, because we just have not done the research, that a very few number of people are doing all the work here.
Yeah, the Pareto figure, I think I don't know if we're the 80-20 or the 90-10.
I think we may be more the 50-50 is my guess.
I don't think,
But,
I think it's.
I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
and, you know, and we don't know, and so part of trying to grasp what you're asking for is to say, okay, who's doing what now? We don't even know that. So, that, you know, that could be a part of a project. Anything else from anybody?
Actually, at one point, we did collect information that the board chairs, I believe, passed along to Lorraine to try to get it entered into the realm system about who's on which ministries. So I think we have that as a starting point.
Yeah, but, yeah, we do, and what's easy to identify is who's the head of the altar guild. But we don't know who are all the members of the altar guild.
No, that was
That's
passed
in
along.
realm groups, yeah.
It's in one group now, okay. So we know more then, and it'd be interesting even just to start there, to take a look at that.
Does the Episcopal Church have any type of data collection instrument to measure like people's vocations, passions, whatever?
There are all sorts of talents and skills surveys
Yeah.
that are out there,
Okay.
and different ones. The one universal experience is, everybody wants that list, and those congregations that have used the vehicles to get it have ended up frustrating the people, because if you ask people what their talents and skills are and then don't ask them to do something, they feel you neglect. Oh, I volunteered to be on the flower guild and no one called. You
I
know?
have a little story to go behind that. We had in 2013, we had a stewardship festival in between services, or after the 10 o'clock service. And people would go up to the various ministries and say, they were saying, here's what the ministry is, and the people, they had little sign-up sheets for people to do that. About 6 weeks later, after that, one of the ministry chairs came up to me and said, I have this list of people, what do I do with it? And so there were about 12 ushers that basically debated, you didn't ask me, I'm not gonna usher.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I have yet to run into a congregation in my experience, and it's just mine, where the thing has been, the data's been collected and people have used it. And I've also yet to run into a situation where the data's been collected and it's not updated.
Well, I think one of the things you need to do is not just identify what skills people have, but you also have to identify what needs the boards need. And, you know, just somehow, I don't know why, but Bobby, when we went to the newcomers at Steve Moore's house, she collected the forms that were handed in by everybody, and she actually made sure that each of the boards contacted these people. Now, I don't know whether that eventually, I think it led to a couple of people getting involved, and I don't know if there was others that expressed an interest, but we didn't have a need for it at the time. But
So the idea here, I just want to capture this for everybody, the idea here is, a possible idea is, what they call them talent banks or data banks and whatever. That's a possible idea, but the more important thing is, strategically thinking, is how do we get proactive about involving people in the church? A answer may be a talent bank. Another answer is, every member of the vestry commits themselves to interview everybody in the congregation personally and invite them into a ministry. That's, and I'm just making this up, you know. I'm not saying that's what we should do, but I am suggesting that as we look at these things, what rises to the level of a strategy is a big idea, and then the plans fill into that. So you know, what are the tactics that make the strategy work? And so we have to guard against that in our own thinking about this, because it's really easy to go right to the plan. And very hard to think big enough, you know, for what are we trying to accomplish here. I think, you know, Al, the stuff that you were presenting earlier said, okay, here's the expectation, you know, is what we're gonna do, okay? Shut up, Jim. All right. We are at halfway through. Do you want to take a 10-minute break? And just,
Yes.
we used to call them bio breaks for those of you who. So, all right. On my clock, it's 10:02. Why don't we move it? I'll quack at you.
you can start quacking.
10:08. 10:08. It's 10:08 now.
It's what's on my watch that
No,
counts.
you're watching it.
I'm sorry, Bill.
Wherever.
Susan, this is delicious.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. All right, I'll take my stupid stick out of it.
I don't know, we hold back end of it, you said, I don't know whether we
Email.
We'll see if that works.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything that important.
What I just said was exactly the opposite. Because it's really easy. I don't think anybody just, give me 5 ideas to help us get people involved. If they can come up with those ideas, but it's too bad.
The age where I have to wait for you, you guys want to make those.
I think that's wonderful. And that is what they're. I agree with you. I totally agree.
I'll give you that.
We were planning to get together this week and work out schedules.
I have 301 lines of data of names and addresses.
Yeah, because we talked about it.
Oh, I'm finding it all.
That's 465. But only about 15 of those were out of town, so we can definitely say, if this was the attendance that, specifically, all you have is a number that we use for sample for attendance or membership. It doesn't mean
You know what? No. Actually, you want to make a copy?
Well, let me see if I can come up with an
Nobody else is doing
how little they knew about what they were doing. Right now, like I talked to one and people would know all kinds of things. And I would be like, oh, he wants to know all kinds of things. How do you know about what you're doing? You know, are you? No, they talk about it all the time, rather than have a flyer.
That are called,
But they have like announcements on the web. But I was thinking as far as how.
Oh, it's in there.
no, it's a
But it's also almost outreach. I mean, that's
I love that
just
idea.
one.
5%, callable at 6.
Yeah, I think that's why we're unique. Because it's an assisted
Wait, is your church the one that doesn't allow limited clergy? Is your church the one that is anti-homosexual or whatever, you know?
I get you.
Not just primary. So here, it's not fun, you know? But it is a really good way of being I don't know if the rest of the church does that, where it's like, hey, we're great. You know, like, I think if people talk to us, they'll probably think the same way.
I was like, well, good, because I needed help yesterday. Maybe, so I'm gonna start getting on to things a little bit more. I need to read out my, CDs, and I'm not well enough, so I'm gonna get on to emails. They don't know this yet.
Yeah, so that'll get into it. Do we have the technical kids?
So,
I don't need the technical, I can do that part, I just can't hold the TV, it's very seriously.
right away, like, hey,
As long as you already have the mount,
we did.
and I hate to
And
this nice mount on the
our story is very much like I think
Right,
others.
or like, I had to hire a handyman to replace the end of the year. I know how to do the electrical work.
With that
I
super
can't
friendly,
find a whole chandelier,
Funny stuff about the other bus.
he's walking over the door.
Which is required,
Then
maybe
what
for
you
one
have,
person.
and then the walking circle.
Yeah, so
What
I
I-
don't
what I'm
that's
doing-
what I was.
I grew up in South, the first I grew up in, and then I had it everywhere.
Which is.
I used to have this example, they were bigger than us, we are now, they were downhill. And I talked to certain one, but I didn't realize I knew this was married, it's just because at the same time. And, and some of the things they wish they had done, or mistakes they made, I was kind of didn't like them.
And then what we did with
So I was
Just the town,
more, this meeting is cultural, it's the other.
He's doing extremely well.
These top floors.
Yes.
the church start doing things that are
But we also, oh, the line is this way. Sorry.
yeah, it's,
Yeah, well, it's not.
almost promise.
well, that's not true.
And the other thing the town was, they had a lot of like pets and smaller things, and those were the things that stopped. Once you started out that help, but those are the things that people would come for. So it's like
Every time we call it,
easy to cut it, but
it wasn't for this lady here, it wasn't for this lady here,
Now I know what you've done.
we wouldn't have a newcomer
with
problem.
this.
I mean, you're the one that goes around and says, how did this do?
We do have two people who are doing that, besides me. Just saying.
Doing what? Hey, are you delegating? We don't like to delegate.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
And Loki's
That's why you
But
pay up.
two
People that used to see Mom and I talked to St. Goldie for many years.
At the same time?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
I'm just doing it. Yeah, but we did because that's not so. How you doing? More friends. One of them were.
nobody's told me different.
They were just here.
Nice. Nice. Did they get out on the town or just?
How are you, Mr. Pierce?
All right,
it's 10 minutes.
Start quacking.
Quack, 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 quack.
It really doesn't matter what time it's on, because I can't, with 10 minutes on your end, I just got 10 minutes.
I realize you're.
Eat this. Drink this. Thank you.
Most of the Dan's gone to be
No, he's coming back. I just distracted him on the break.
And
Al is getting coffee.
I'm taking care of it all. I just realized I don't know what I thought that. I thought we talked about it.
okay, let's move on along. Rick and Bob have volunteered to go next. They're the outreach folk. So let her rip.
Bob, it's community center. Bob and I did research with the outreach program. We did not put it on video because Bob was not photogenic enough. These are 2 pages. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Thank you.
I think there's one there. We interviewed the outreach program director, board member, and several of the board ministry members. Bob is also oversees that committee, so we had pretty direct contact. I did some of the, well, during those interviews, we came up with affordable transitional workforce housing and access to nutritional food, meals, improved developmental, that's what I say in about a quarter, remedial educational opportunities are some of the important things that the outreach program is looking at in Brunswick County. We took some statistical analysis. These are based on the most recent census 2022 for Brunswick County, as well as the state of North Carolina. Right now, our population is about 145,000. By 2027, in 5 years, it'll be 161,000. That's based on previous population growth. However, in the last year, over 28,000 homes have been approved in Brunswick County, up and down 17 and 211. So those figures could be out of date by 2025. As you notice, one of the other reports, national reports, said that we were going to be over 50,000 over 65. Well, we're 53,000 over 65 in Brunswick County by this year. Now, taking that population of underprivileged or in poverty, you'll notice that the poverty level in Brunswick County is 9.8. That's basically a very small amount. We are considered a non-poor county as far as the state of North Carolina is concerned. Because the state of North Carolina is about 11%, we're 9.8. If you notice, you take the figures, the 9.8 of the population of 132 for white, 114 for black, 8 for Hispanic, and 5 for others, Indian, Muslim, we have some Cherokees, Cherokee Nation down here, and other Indian nations, is 9.8 percentage. It will give you the percentage of each one of those populations. It tends to follow accurate, okay? The median mortgage, well, we have 92,000 units right now. Already been approved 27, 23. It's going to be well over 140,000 by the year 2027. And of those, 82% right now are owner occupied. The rest are rental, or not occupied at all. I found it interesting that the median mortgage was, and cost of running a operational house is $14,000 a month. Yet the rental is over $1,000 a month. That's a big disparity. No wonder we can't get the workforce down here. The rent is equal to buying a home. And that's where we need additional housing and stuff. On the second page, I used the Pew results. I don't know if anybody's used Pew research. I've used it in the past on analysis of population growth and stuff, and they're pretty accurate. In the state of North Carolina, the percentage of mainline Protestants. This is Catholic, Episcopalians, Methodists, Lutherans, Presbyterians, etc., etc. Percentage of evangelical Protestants are your generations, churches of that, the mega churches in the Midwest and the South, and including some of the Baptists. So the percentage of mainline Protestants is 19%. By 2027, if our population is 161 as projected, mainline Protestants will be 30,000, and using the current percentage of Episcopalians, according to the Pew report in Brunswick County, of 0.975% are Episcopalians. That's 2,982 Episcopalians by 2027. Right? So the population growth, I don't think we're planning for it.
That's the Brunswick County number of Episcopalians?
That's the Brunswick County number, according to Pew, and I have the document.
And there's three?
There are 3 churches now. We're at 650, thereabouts. I'm not sure what Leland's on. I think they're under 200.
Under 100.
Under 100? Yeah. And Shalot is about 200, 250?
Yes, that's
So we're less than half. So our population of Episcopalians is going to double by the year 2027. Right? So anyway, that leads into a couple of strategies. All right, the proposal number 1, this is kind of unique. We're looking at transitional housing, using the for the homeless or for just as transitional. Somebody's coming off of drug rehabilitation. They're eligible, according to the county, to move into transitional housing while they get a job and come up with a salary that'll pay the $1,000 in rent. They can be there for 6 months and then move on. Location, they can pick that out. I looked at BSL. The Episcopal Church, St. Philip's, at one time owned land out in BSL. I don't know if anybody knew that, but they do own land out there.
We don't anymore.
Oh, we don't?
No.
It's getting back to the diocese.
All right, but the
diocese
diocese owns it.
owns it.
All right, the Episcopal Church owns it.
Yeah.
Is to use that for transitional housing. And the reason I just picked that was because the New Hope Clinic for medical supplies, the food bank is right down the street, the police department's right across the street, city government's right next door. It's a well-located place for the community. That's a 3 to 5 year plan, probably farther. Would we build them? Maybe, maybe not. We could work with Habitat, but that's getting into the fine point. Reopen the free lunch program. It was very well received by the homeless here in Southport. And I think that with our parish hall, or even with the old parish hall, with a renovated kitchen, they could easily start up that program in 1 to 3 years. All right? So that's number 2. Number 3 is the educational need in Brunswick County. They're working with Williamson Elementary School, and they're not getting the reception that they would like. In another organization I'm in, we work with mentors. During the school year, we have 6 or 7 mentors a month going down there for science projects. This is something we could work with Southport Elementary School or Williamson. There's also need for mentors in the robotics out at Brunswick High School, and et cetera like that. So that's a 2 to 3 year program I think that we could develop here, or that they could develop and get into the high schools or elementary schools. Number 4, based on, and this is not outreach, it was just collaboration of thought, based on the population growth, I think we should be looking at being the seed parish for a new parish here in Brunswick County. Location, I don't know. Conversely, if you're looking at that, we need more staff and everything, but everybody else has gone over that. And our last thing that Bob brought up already is the need for a list of previous vocations, previous whatever that we can do here. But it's not functional. In another organization that I'm in, we've learned that a person comes into our organization, they give us a background history of what they did, what they like to do. They are immediately assigned to a committee. That committee chairman is responsible for making sure that that individual is incorporated into the group immediately. And they have to report on it at board meetings or in some fashion that way. So very important to engage the person they come in. Because I'll tell you what, they sit there for 2 months and they lose interest. They're not going to raise their hand. But if they feel welcomed, which normally people coming into this church feel welcome, well, let's make them really feel welcome. You like to sing, you like to pound a hammer, dance, like to pound a hammer, like to paint, like to converse with people, like to encourage people. We got to grab them right away and make sure that they really feel welcomed that way.
Okay,
Okay?
questions?
No quack quack? Good.
Could I add something? One of the issues I have, a big question in my mind is what is our final objective here? If our final objective is to grow the church, and by growing the church, we have more hands to help, we have more funds to utilize for the betterment of not only the church but outside. But that's the ultimate objective. We first have to ensure that people know that St. Philip's is here so that they know to come here. And a lot of these, in dealing with the outreach board the last couple of times, I've come to realize that their goal really is to do as much good as they possibly can, short of advertising St. Philip's. They would much rather take money and put it into a larger, or have a, like CIS, Community in Schools, or what's the one that Sally Leonard is in charge of?
Partnership in housing.
The whole idea was, and somehow St. Philip's gets lost in the shuffle. And, it's hard to disagree with what they're trying to do, because they're trying to do the most good, get the most bang for their buck, but then we're getting lost. St. Philip's gets lost in the whole thing. That's an issue we have to deal with. If the objective is to grow the church.
Which we have not established. I mean, this body, this strategic planning body is not established that that's the objective. If it is, it is. But that's something that we need to talk
I
about.
think it's something that we have to be aware of too.
Well, I guess I'm just,
I mean, you have to be aware of what the mindset is what I'm saying.
I agree with you. There are people who would like to see us shrink the church. As a matter of fact, there are people who think that it would be really good if we founded another church somewhere else, we get rid of some people so we go back to not being a program-sized parish. That's an attitude, trust me, it's out there. Right?
Yeah.
And so, you're the leaders, you get to decide what the objective is, and we'll figure out what that is in the future.
I just wanted to comment a little bit about the welcoming. I think this is the very most welcoming church we have ever been in. We fill out the little forms, we got phone calls, we got invitations, we got emails, do this, do this. I think the greatest gem in all of Brunswick County is Lorraine.
Yeah, here.
No,
She's not here.
without Lorraine,
She knows.
what would any of us do?
Yeah.
So, where are you?
She left Fringe.
Yes, just one.
Oh, darn, and I was looking for
That was a big
Lorraine
part
things.
of our thing, is when we talk to people, like, the welcoming here, and Lisa wasn't here when we joined, so I'm sure it's only gotten better. But we were out to lunch with Eric and Sue, Lorraine was on us immediately. You know, I think that's, if St. Philip's is firing off on all cylinders in any section, I think that's definitely where we're really doing it.
The one comment I make is, I say this in every group I've ever worked with, every church thinks they're the most welcoming church. And the reason why is they survey their members, and the members say, yeah, when we came, we were treated really well. What we didn't do is survey other people who weren't treated well and left. And we don't know what percentage of newcomers were treated like you. If they all were, that's a welcoming church. If only 3 were, maybe not.
Yeah, Jim, a couple questions, 2 questions. Why, if Leland is the biggest growing portion of Brunswick County, why did Old Souls not grow?
Well, because All Souls isn't in Leland.
It's not in Leland.
Yeah, but it has a Leland address.
Right.
It has a Leland post office.
But it's a lot closer to Leland than we are.
It's a lot closer, and you know, if you were going to do a strategy that says find another church, if I were in charge of that strategy, I would say, number 1, get with the Leland, get with the diocese, get with the Leland folk and say, how can we take that asset, which is in the wrong place, and combine those people with our people and find a 3rd location where you could do that. And I would agree in Leland.
Yeah. Well,
But you also understand, there are 2 huge mega churches that are now in Leland, and they're growing by leaps and bounds. One of them has the elementary school on 133 if you're going up that way. And on Sunday, they need police people to, you know.
You're also in proximity of Wilmington too, with the 2 big churches.
Right, yeah, well, yeah. If we establish a church in Leland, St. Paul's would have, and St. James would have the right to say, we don't want you to break them.
I certainly didn't want to imply that we weren't a welcoming church. What I think happens, however, is no matter how much we welcome, the ministries and boards are not encouraged, going out and reaching out to these people to encourage them to become members of whatever they're doing. Maybe they are, but
what you're talking about is a distinction between how you handle a new person coming in the church and how you get them to be integrated into the life of the church. Those are 2 separate processes requiring 2 separate sets of skills. In some cases, it appears, since 2 of you are here, saying that it worked, you know, and that's a good thing. But the question is, how good are we at all of the new people coming in getting as involved as, obviously you're in the vestry already, you know, so you're involved. Okay, Bob?
Quick clarification, Bob, when you had said that St. Philip's was getting lost in some of these activities, were you implying that we should be doing more of actually getting people out there working on various outreach activities versus just handing out money?
Well, that was one of the questions I asked. I asked them if they had an accounting for how many parishioners are actually working in these various groups, like CIS and you know, the food pantry and all that sort of thing. I think there's a considerable number that are from St. Philip's, but I don't know that we've ever captured it. So that was one of the things that I thought that should be done, so that we have a feel for how active our people really are. I mean, we may be more active than we really think we are.
I'd be surprised if that was the case. It seems to me, if anything, that we sort of moved away from that. We need to start getting back to it, but I guess that's something that the strategy could
Well,
consider.
you're focused on the finance, so you're very conscious of that, so you're not aware of the other.
Well, the other thing to do is have a little stamp and put on every diaper we give away, brought to you by St. Philip's.
Well,
That
we
would
do.
get our name out.
They do that.
They do.
They do that. They put in the packages given out that this is from St.
Okay,
Philip's.
so there's an example. All right, we are past time. Who has not yet gone?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to go?
I'm gonna take the one thing.
All right. We are not as organized as everyone else has been, partly because we have not been available to each other. I did some interesting research, I think, but none of it was local. It was from churches that we participated in Texas, in Phoenix, in Maine. So I got some really interesting ideas, particularly from the Reverend Dr. Philip Cheney, perhaps you're aware of him, who began his Episcopal life here at the Chapel of the Cross, oddly enough. So anyhow, we are working on faith formation and how to make ourselves available to others. And some of the ideas that we've come up with were really pretty interesting. One I think we've tackled before, and it was actually pretty expensive, was bringing speakers in. So I'm not sure, the expensive part I got from you, from Bob. So I'm not sure that we want to go there, but it's perhaps a way to draw people in. An interesting group in Tyler, Texas is called Prime Timers, and it is actually for all of our congregations, we're all prime timers, really, to do whatever the interest seems to be, whether you like gaming, Scrabble, Mahjong, whatever, book club, just sitting around to chat, dessert things, whatever, but a way to bring older folks who have specific interests, bring them and let those interests blossom within that group. Monthly neighborhood dinners came up, and that's something we already do. And Gerard and I both do those, and they are wonderful, wonderful way to get people together. Neighborhood communions, I thought that was interesting. During special seasons hosted by individual families, perhaps something similar to what you do at the Celtic service, where you're sharing not the wafers, but bread and wine, and just sharing fellowship. Lunch, specifically lunch or dinner with the rector, which I thought was interesting. St. Luke's locally does something called a giving garden. I participated in something like that years ago, and ours was called Let Us, L-E-T-T-U-C-E, Let Us Pray, which is interesting. A charismatic healing service, which would draw people from everywhere, with a number of ministers, retired or not, where people could chat one-on-one, could pray together, could speak out if they were interested, and just come away, if not feeling cured, certainly feeling whole. A favorite is Lemonade on the Lawn, which happened at St. Anne's by the Sea once a month, where lemonade and iced tea and cookies, little snacks would be provided, and anybody who was passing by, we are such in a beautiful location, would be invited to come and join us. Along with that, you could incorporate something about the labyrinth. My English teacher said linger in the labyrinth, but you could do, sort of incorporate that into hosting a gathering on the lawn. Deb Alt, I think, has begun this program with the Chapel of the Cross, which is again a wonderful idea. Getting people to volunteer by twos, somebody said that before, not one, by twos, to docent for folks who are interested. And lots of people who are walking by will go in to see what's there. And it would be nice to have someone to fill them in with a little history. Another thought around holiday time would be a nativity reenactment. It could happen on the portico with tons of people sitting on the lawn, enjoying that, perhaps caroling afterwards. And another holiday thought was a faith walk. Another parish I belonged to did a faith walk that sort of replicated visiting the 7 Hills of Rome, where you would visit 7 churches, and somebody would research a little something about each church and present it. I can think of 5 within walking distance. I'm not sure where the other 2 are. But anyhow, that was a thought. And
There's always the 5 Hills of Southport.
oh, all righty. Well, there you go. It fits.
Haven't found the first hill yet.
We'll get there.
Well, our church didn't have hills either, but we had more than 7 churches in the neighborhood, so that was an easy one to do. And, well, so I guess the ones that we kind of focused on as being perhaps the most interesting were the prime timers, definitely the lemonade on the lawn, and the charismatic healing service that would bring people in from everywhere. And of course, the thing that Deb has already started with the Chapel of the Cross. So, want to just sum up the
So
marketing?
it's, and I think it's come up a lot already during the meeting, and I know this isn't a churchy way to put it, but it's brand awareness. Make people aware of who we are, where we are, and what we do and what we represent, right? So, and I think we're all aware, this big, beautiful new building, this beautiful landscaping that's going on, we're way underutilizing that. The fact that we don't have a tent out front once a month with, and the lemonade on the lawn thing is, it's not just to let them know we're here. It's how many people are thinking about it, but not taking that step to come through the door. This puts us out in the public area. It's more approachable. It's easier to have people walk up to you while you're out there and be like, oh, talk to you about the church. A lot of people, I didn't, I was raised Catholic. I wasn't sure what the differences between a Catholic church and an Episcopal church were prior to converting. So, I mean, there's people out there that aren't sure of our brand. And I want to be able to get them not just when they walk in the door, but when they walk by the church. And I think that's somewhere we've already spent a ton of time, talent, and energy creating a beautiful area to do that with. I just think we're not utilizing it. So the lemonade on the lawn thing, I love it, whether it's lemonade or whatever approach. The only drawbacks I'm seeing are we suffer from lack of volunteers horribly. Coffee hour, the hospitality board I know is struggling. So when we hear all of these ideas, including our ideas, my fear is we're manning the positions that we're all talking about. I would love to do this, and I'd love to volunteer once a month to go sit out at the tent on the lawn and just talk to every passerby that comes by. But I'm worried, not just for our ideas, but for a lot of the ideas we're hearing today, is just filling those positions. Yeah, that's what we have.
Okay, it gets back to what we talked about, is get the church more involved.
Questions or comments on this presentation?
I'd like to just ask a question about the lawn. Do we have restrictions on the use of the lawn? Bill, that somebody's involved with
Through the town?
that. No, here, I mean.
What's your question?
Restrictions from the church or from the town?
This is for Bill Pittenbender. Do we have restrictions on the lawn, like can we put a tent up?
No, there are no restrictions.
Okay.
Just leave it up forever.
Just need approval.
Other questions?
It sounded like a lot of, well, what you were suggesting was getting new people in here. Was there any consideration about growing the faith of the folks that are already here, enhancing their experience?
Not really.
Yeah, as far as I went, there was only so much, so I couldn't, the way I looked at it more was, like I said, brand awareness, location, things like that. As far as the people in the church, I don't have the experience or the knowledge to really, I didn't feel I did to address that in a fair way, where any experience I do have is more about marketing.
Other questions?
Well, I think that Craig and I, our experience was that we were approached, that we were invited to participate. And proof of the pudding, look where we are.
But I'm looking at it just in slightly different, okay, so we have people that are here, is there something that could be done for me, anyone, to increase my faith? So, believe in Episcopal things, but could I believe in them stronger, or, have a greater love of God, or things that, like I attend Bible study on Thursday mornings, so, that to me is something that would be helping, like, along those lines.
The idea was tossed around back at the beginning of this. We did toss around certain ideas, Sunday school ideas, things like that. But I didn't get any legs under them, to be honest. Again, through ignorance of it and demographics. So I think that's going to be, as far as like you said, the Bible study. I think all the different ideas that have been kicked around, and this is just me personally, I think we do a really good job of that. Between the different Bible studies, the theology uncorked, I think there's so many opportunities that we don't even have enough time in our schedule to attend most of the things we would love to attend. There's so many fun and enlightening options that I think that's going, personally, I don't know, I think that's going great as far as our church goes. I think there's a lot of options out there.
There is data that we collected in 2019. We have renewal works, and we still have that data somewhere, right, Lynn?
Somewhere.
That would be good to look at, renewal.
And that literally was a parish-wide study of what the spiritual needs were of the congregation. And there's reports about where people are at different stages of their life, where they are at different stages of their journey along. I mean, it's a very thorough compilation of, and again, the data's 4 years old, but it's pre-COVID, which also makes a difference.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
One of the things that I'm very jealous of is your Friday morning men's group. And something like that, I think, might be addressed in that prime timers group if people wanted to do that. Because Jerry comes home and we chew it all over together, and I love it. So that's a great thing.
Yes. Okay. We have one more group. It's Margaret and Bill.
Yeah, our dyad is focused on worship. Get back to people.
Here it is.
We did a lot of focus on Lutheran and Episcopal churches. Lutheran being very similar, obviously we're in communion with them. We tried to look at similar sized parishes and bigger, as we tend to think we're going to grow. So what are they doing that works? And we looked at one parish, really by mistake, that was bigger than we are and now is smaller than we are, to find out what happened. So we don't make that mistake in our planning. And the kind of core ideas that came across focused on those communities that are senior communities, retirement communities, churches that function on less on little kids and more on senior citizens, because we seem to think that's the way we view the population of Brunswick County going. And one of the things we found is multiple places had problems in your music program, though they all viewed it as vital to their success. When hard times hit, it's the easy thing to cut. you know, if you had a choir director, organist person, and you had a second part-time person doing a brass quintet, folk music guitar, it was easy to cut that salary, and yet that was counterproductive. It was easy to cut buying special things to update. So one of our suggestions is it's crossbreed, is to create a music endowment that could support the needs of the time. It'd have to be tied to music program, but it could be redefined as needed, whether it would be the salary of the principal person, whether it would be assistants, whether it would be special events, those kinds of things. So that was, you know, kind of the first thing we came up with. Again, discover needs at the time, flexible, we didn't define it, not given by one person like a typical endowment, but an open endowment to any parishioner or any outside group that wanted to contribute toward it. The next thing we looked at, we did meet with the worship board and tried not to step on what they're already doing, because they're already looking at another service. So how could we incorporate other services that we've read about that really help the community as well as the particular parish? We saw ideas like pop-up church, followed by what they call pub conversations, similar to Theology Uncorked for the conversations, but with a service to go with it, not at the structure of the main church, and mobile, you know, changing from time to time. We saw an idea of cultural celebration of various saints, just to, you know, around St. Patrick's Day, celebrate the Irish saints in a special Eucharist, and they were doing that like quarterly, midweek dinner and service, so that you got people to come out, and that seemed to work even with senior citizens, which kind of goes against our traditional thinking, is that our people don't like to come out at night. Well, apparently there are a lot of us that do. And the one that we found in several places, from the East Coast to Arkansas to Oregon, was a Eucharist centered around 12-step programs. And that is our recommendation. Whether it would be monthly, whether it be yearly, whether it be quarterly, whether it became bi-weekly, nobody had it more than bi-weekly. And it would be kicked off, you know, we're going a little into process, but with some education and then a service. And one parish we found actually had opened their doors. We do AA here. They had AA, they had OA, they had NA, they had a codependency group. They had 13 12-step programs weekly in their building. They aren't any bigger than we are.
There's a 12-step program, by the way, for fundamentalists.
Okay.
Seriously, to get them out of being fundamentalists.
Has anybody signed up for it?
I'll tell you what, if you're in Appalachia, which has got a big bunch of fundamentalist folks, the ones that come over to mainline denominations find themselves just totally lost, and that's where it came from, is just helping people to get out of that.
Yeah, and we've researched that far, just that it existed and was being attended. And again, where it would be, how it would be, but focused on not only our members, but mainly the community. And then the last one we looked at, and there's been discussion about it, is we looked at an off-site place. Do we need you know, another building? Do we need to help start a mission church? And we looked at what we had with our island summer service, and we thought to gradually increase the time frame of an off-site service, whether it's the island service we have now or something like it, to move to a year-round offering with great consideration giving to finding an indoor site, whether it be a rented storefront, an Elks Club or Moose Lodge, whether it's the VFW in BSL, what it would be. And there's staffing implications for that. Obviously, that would be challenging to do with, you know, 2 priests on staff, but that we thought that would expand us into the rest of the community and help serve it. And again, location could be part of the discovery process if that's an accepted strategy.
Okay.
Yes?
Oh, any thoughts about laity doing morning prayer? Isn't there an don't we equip the laity to do morning prayer?
Sure. Anybody can do more work.
Yeah, so I mean, in
Didn't
storefront.
see it anywhere. And we
It
didn't think about
doesn't, you know, if you had a storefront,
Right, and again, that would be
that could be a lay person.
light out. And
Yeah.
Just give
please
morning
let-
prayer.
let Margaret do more.
There is a church in Valley Cruces that does Compline 4 nights a week,
Favorite service of mine.
which would be Zoom, a Zoom Compline. So I did notice that they were doing that, and I would assume that could be a lay person effort.
Other questions, comments? I just have one comment, is that a resource which I should have given you before, but you want to go back and do some research in it. There's a group called George Barna and Associates, B-A-R-N-A. George Barna is a guy who made $1 gajillion before he was 30 and decided to give up his business and sold it and live on that thing and started the Barna and Associates group. They do research into Protestant churches, 19 different denominations. And that's all they do is and basically he's in market research, and so he uses a market research approach to doing that. One of the presentations I went to, where George was there, he was talking about, they surveyed 19 different denominations. And they asked each of the denomination heads, so like the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, give me your 10 strongest congregations. And then they went to the 10 rectors and said, give me your 10 most faithful people. And so they ended up with 1,900 people they were talking to in this survey, in the different things. And the first question they asked was, when was the last time you experienced God in your worship? And people, added yesterday, last month, whatever. Episcopalians and Presbyterians came in 19th. Okay. So apparently there is not a direct linkage between what we do on Sunday and what people think they're doing in terms of experiencing God in worship. The second thing is they went and interviewed the pastor of the one congregation where all 10 people said that they experienced God the last Sunday they were in church. The only one. And he's a Church of God person. And their key factor, as this pastor said, is that they don't have times of services. They have an 8 o'clock service, and when it's over, it's over. And then they have a scheduled 9 o'clock service, but if the 8 o'clock people are still experiencing God, they just keep going. They go longer, and they say, and they have a discerner person who says, God is here today or God is not, and tells the pastor keep going or don't. And the pastor says, I just tell the people, if the parking lot's still full when you get here, just pray for those people because they're having a God experience. The second characteristic he had to the thing was, in addition to that, they began each service with a half an hour of singing. Half an hour of music. And anybody can be in the mood to worship if you haven't gotten the Spirit through singing. That was his thing. I don't know what that means. I'm just reporting to you some silly data. Barna. Yeah. But they've done all sorts of studies of churches, and Episcopalians are in that. But then so are a whole bunch of evangelical fundamentalist ones, which we tend not to think about when we do our surveys.
It's similar to the Pew report.
Yeah. Okay. Overall,
Is it working in good shape? Did you check on that? Okay, that might be something to consider.
overall, let me just tell you what I heard today. I heard many of you resorting to ideas which could be used in fulfillment of a greater goal. And I'm asking your question, Bob, is that the strategy could be grow the number of people coming to church. And then I heard a whole lot of ideas that would help do that. Okay, but a strategy is a overarching thing. And in terms of our work together, would involve multiple boards or multiple disciplines within the boards. So even if it was the music thing, and you need to raise a music endowment, then you got finance and facilities, about, you know, there's all those different things. But those are all, well, how do I get to this goal? So I want us to think, when we go home, about what are the big overarching themes that you heard? One of them is, you know, Bob stated clearly, to grow the parish, that's one. That's an okay, how do we do that? Then a lot of the ideas that are in there are there. The other thing I heard is, we do not agree amongst ourselves the state of our own congregation. There's a general feeling, one way or another, that we should be and could be involving more people. And there are people who are gifted by God. You weren't here, Lorraine, when you were called out as one of those, at involving other people. You know, I mean, you watched Lorraine at the beginning of a service, and she reminds me of a butterfly pollinating different flowers, you know, going around to different people. But I can tell you there are a number of people who are here because that pollination occurred, you know, and that's a gift. And not everybody has that gift. There are some people you don't want doing that, you know, because they would make them all Lutherans. But I had a conversation the other day with somebody, and I want to reiterate this for everybody. We do not ask people to do ministry. Period. We don't. Right? We make announcements from, you know, the clergy make announcements. We need somebody to help with the website. Please sign up. Okay? It's all reactive. We're waiting for someone to present themselves to do this work. People will get involved because somebody else sits down with them, talks with them, and asks them. You know, and if you don't do that, they won't get involved. The people who will get involved are the people who are self-starters. I think I'm talking to a whole room of self-starters. You're involved, you know, but not. I have not seen great evidence of people sitting down with other individuals and saying, "Who are you? Where are you from? What's your experience? What do you want to do? We have needs for this, that, and the other thing. You want to do?" And that's something that we're always at. We, the Episcopal Church, is rife with that attitude. That's how we recruit our clergy. We wait for somebody to feel called. You know, that's silly. And so we gather all the people who feel called, and God knows what's going on in their warped little minds, and we then try and train them into some sense of what it is. But you see the diversity of clergy comes out of that diversity of not having any intentional plan of looking for someone and saying, this is who we want. So those of you who said, and each of you said it in your own way, we need to identify what it is we need and go looking for it. That's more proactive, and I heard it in almost every one of your reports, is that we need to be less reactive and more proactive, whether that's with newcomers, or with outreach, or with whatever. That's an overarching theme I heard.
But isn't there a direct approach, is to actually ask people what their experiences are, what their skills are, what their interests are, what their needs are, and once you get that, then you have at least a direction to go in, right?
Absolutely.
You know, my experience has been, you know, this communications thing. I've had to rely totally on Lorraine, and I shouldn't have to.
Well, you shouldn't,
but you know, the point is, you know, we need somebody. We need somebody to head up the external communication. You know, dealing with the port pilot and so forth. You can stand up there in front of the congregation every Sunday and say, we need somebody to do this.
They won't do it.
And first of all, chances are you're not going to get any response. And secondly, if you do, you're not sure whether that person really is capable of doing it.
Amen. Amen.
So you have to, you know, I think it's kind of, we're doing, it can't be top down, it's gotta.
Absolutely, and I would go further to say, I did this when I was a rector, is that as you look out over the congregation, you see new people, and you want to greet them, and somebody took you to lunch or dinner, wherever they did, that's fine. I would just call them into the office, and we'd sit down and say, and this was the line I used, I don't know what, but I am certain that God is calling you to ministry. Let's explore what that is.
Well, I think it comes from both sides, though. On the one hand, we have to have all the boards come up with their needs. On the other hand, we have to talk to all of the people and find out what their skills are, and then try to figure out where the matches are.
We're gonna have a whole notebook, once all this stuff gets put in, of what our needs are. We just heard it. Not all of them, but at least the top ones that people research, okay?
Yes.
You're absolutely right, but as I've said before, we didn't ask anybody to help with the website.
Yes, I'll disagree with that, because, yes, we didn't go specifically to anyone, but we did announce it.
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying, that's not asking.
In the emails.
That's, to my mind, that's not asking. Unless the ask is made personally, and by the way, I believe that about it's a stewardship issue, okay? Unless we're raising endowment stuff and working on that, say, anybody want to give some endowment money? Hey, no one's going to come. But if you sit down with somebody and say, what are you interested in? Do you have the capacity to give? How much do you want to give? Have that conversation. It's a different conversation. It's just different. Okay, Rick.
I think a lot of it, and maybe this is because I was in it for 30 years, is talking with people and finding out what their lifestyles are, finding out what their families are, finding out what they need, finding out how much money they have to spend. Because my living depended on finding out how much money they had to spend. And you get into things. Bill Carney and I had a conversation about a month or two ago, and I found out more from him probably than he's told anybody in this room. In just, a half-hour conversation. Same town, Gaithersburg, Maryland. Ascension. It was, helped start the other, what was it, St. Thomas or up in
St. Nicholas.
St. Nicholas. Just in a half-hour conversation with him. I won't tell you what I had learned from his wife when I had a half-hour conversation.
He still talks to me.
But we have to have training, I think, in some sense, on how to sell.
Yep, absolutely.
And, it's easy. It's hard to get over that first question. So what do you do for your living? Margaret, what do you do? Where are you from? And all of a sudden you get into the conversation, you're interested in that person and what they're telling you, and all of a sudden, believe me, everyone in this room likes to talk about themselves, me included.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm doing that by way of just an observation of what I heard as sitting here listening to all of this. You need to get at least one hard copy to Lorraine, and you will get back a PDF probably you can print out on your own computer to fill your own notebook, okay? Because I want all the data, not just the 3 things, but all the data, so that we've got it, we just captured it. Is everybody okay with that assignment?
Yeah.
Okay. The next time we meet, and that's going to be an interesting negotiation to find out when we can meet next. But I think I think we can do it in a month's time. I can give you a month between the meetings, at least, okay? Your homework will be, again, with your same partner in dyads. But here's the process. I want you to do it individually. What we're going to pass out is one of these, and we will send one of these to you electronically tomorrow or Monday or what. Are you working next week? Mm-hmm. Okay, Monday. Okay, so that when you come next time, you'll have it electronically. But I want you to first do it individually, and then meet together and negotiate a common list. Okay, this is called a SWOT analysis, and you will be doing it in the same area of ministry that you worked on. So for those of you who worked on finance facility, you'll again work on finance and facility, okay? And what you want to do is you want to write down, and this is looking only at St. Philip's, nobody else, only at St. Philip's. What are our strengths? Okay, I will give you an example in worship. You can write this down right now because everybody says it. We have for whatever reason, no matter how unified we are, Sunday morning is a glorious thing in this congregation. It's welcoming, it's delightful. That's a strength. Okay. Weaknesses. What are the weaknesses? Weaknesses will be a perception issue. It is possible, by the way, that somebody will find something a strength that somebody else finds a weakness. That's okay. All right? But there are things, okay, we are not really big on ecumenical ministry to one-armed Puerto Ricans with bad breath. That's a weakness here. We just don't do it, okay? So figure out what your weaknesses are. Because there's areas of weakness are things that you may want to improve on. Whether you may want to say, well, it's okay that we're weak in that area. When we get down to making choices. Okay? The next area is opportunities. Again, somebody may find an opportunity and somebody may find it a weakness. It's very different. What are the opportunities? Here's an opportunity you all can write down now because we're going to write it down in the final list. And that is, an opportunity we have is our county is growing. Now, how we take advantage of that opportunity is what we're going to decide, but that is an opportunity for us, right? And then there are threats. Threats are interesting because some opportunities are threats for people. I go back to the idea that some people want to make our congregation smaller and whatever. So some people say it's a strength that we're growing, and somebody else says, no, it's a threat because I don't like the way we're doing it. It's fine, you're allowed your opinion. We can negotiate again a common list, or we'll at least acknowledge that they exist in two places. And threats come in two kinds. There's the kind that we can plan for, and then there's the unknown. Worldwide recession is going to be a threat, at least to finance and facilities, if not to everybody. The next pandemic, the next hurricane, those are things that are threats to us. And, because we may want to, as we have in the safety committee, said that's a potential area of threat, so let's plan to what happens when we have that emergency, that threat happens. That's an example of how you have a plan to something that's a threat. Does that make sense? Everybody get SWOT?
Yeah.
Any questions? Okay, so the process is you go home and you pray about it. Please do this. Please pray before you do this. Right? We're inviting God. Somebody said, I'm okay with this thing, but I don't see any room for the Holy Spirit. Well, one way to put room for the Holy Spirit is to invite God into your deliberations. Okay? Then get together sometime in the next month, the two of you, and see what you have. Okay? I'm going to ask that you try and limit each area to 3 negotiated things. Okay? So 3 threats, 3 opportunities, 3 weaknesses, 3 strengths, negotiated as a common list between you and your partner. And that's not to say that if you don't have as one of those 3, that what you had as a strength isn't there. It's just to say, we're going for the strengths, not just the strengths. Okay, is that clear? Okay, so what we need now to do is pick a time to meet.
Do you want that just brought on the day we meet, or do you want that transmitted to you before?
I think it would be lovely. I think you can just bring it to the meeting. Because when we see it all, it's going to go in your notebook in each of these areas anyway. But if you have it electronically, it'll be easy to get that back to you. So I'm looking for a time that we can meet.
13th or 20th.
20th have yard duty.
Can't do the 13th.
That's a high priority. I got to do yard duty.
One each.
I know, I'm just gonna take one for Jeff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There should, I'm giving all.
But you want to raise hands.
I'll make it.
Okay,
Because,
who can make it on the 13th?
who can't?
Who can't make it on the 13th? 2. Okay, who can't make it on the 20th? 2.
Who's got yard duty?
You can trade.
Jim will do your yard duty when it comes for me.
27th?
2 Saturdays out.
All right, you tell me, I'm not gonna,
27th?
that's Memorial Day weekend.
Oh, God.
Oh.
That's open.
I'm just guessing that you don't wanna meet Memorial Day weekend.
How about a Friday?
I was about to say, how about, anybody open to the idea of maybe doing post-service, maybe like noon on a Sunday?
So the last time Sid Phillips did this, that's when we met after
I'm
service on
just
Sunday.
pitching that out there.
Okay, so how many can't make it on the 7th?
That's the bishop's visit, but we
The
still.
bishop's visit.
Well, that'll be out at St.
Okay, how many can't make it on the 14th?
That's
That's
Mother's
Mother's
Day.
Day.
So, how many can't make it on the 21st? 3. Okay.
Friday, can't get, how about Friday?
How about Fridays?
Can't get it.
Busy Saturday.
Fridays.
Fridays.
I'm teaching.
The problem with Fridays is that I've got, for those of you who don't know, I'm going blind, and I can't drive at night, so if it's dark, I have an issue.
Got it.
But it shouldn't be dark if we started at 5 o'clock and we go for 3.5 hours, that's 8:30, it still should be lightish.
Cutting it.
It's cutting it close, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to the rector.
I like the-
Say this is day off.
I think you're opening the liability of the church.
I like the idea that that would force us to keep the meeting on time.
You need a driver.
Yeah.
Well, I had a driver the last time we met.
Yeah, we gave it a
Our
drive.
senior warden makes a good point that Thursdays and Fridays are the rector's day off.
Right.
So if the choice is to have it on a
That's a good
Friday,
point.
you should probably check to make sure the rector is available.
Yeah, I think we ought to respect that.
Everybody have busy Mondays?
Mondays are not good for me.
No,
Okay.
I'm so.
Okay, so now we're headed into June. What does June 3rd do to anybody?
I'm out. I'm out on
You're
Tuesday.
out. June 10th.
That's good.
I'm good.
Good.
Anybody can't make it on June 10th?
I think the rector has a wedding that day.
No, I believe well, I don't have anything on my calendar though.
I can't
So I
go.
wouldn't know.
You can't do the 10th.
I can't do the 10th.
Okay.
I think we're never gonna get everybody. I think you're gonna go back to one of the ones that had two.
Yep.
Two.
I think you're right. See, this is not gonna take you really, you don't need a whole lot of time to do the work in between.
Yeah.
Okay? So let me try one other date that we haven't talked about, and that's May 6th. 1 out. 2, 3 out. You know, you people, it's sinful, it's how busy you are. This is where Jesus, what you're saying is, I have to travel instead of doing my responsibility to Jesus. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay, exactly. Just so long as you.
I'm visiting churches abroad.
Okay, so we had 2 on the 13th and 2 on the 20th, right?
Actually, I'm not available the 20th either, so there's 3 on the 20th.
Go to the 13th.
I'm not.
13th.
Go to the 13th.
Going once, going twice.
What
13th.
month is that?
May.
That's May.
May.
9 o'clock
9 a.m.
on the 13th.
Well, let's watch it.
Saturday the 13th.
And since Margaret won't be here, she can supply the donuts.
And that is Mother's Day weekend.
Well, it's Mother's Day weekend, that's not Mother's Day, right?
No, I'm just bringing
Well,
that
I'm
up.
not
Is
a
that
mother.
It is
Also,
Mother's
mothers
Day
can stay
weekend,
home.
What is the name of this thing?
if you're a mother.
I had a Mother's Day request to switch to the food service on Father's Day from a mother. All right, so 9 o'clock on the 13th.
We did agree that the vestry meeting scheduled for this Tuesday is off?
That's correct. We're gonna have about a 10-minute vestry meeting after this.
Okay.
Also,
So we're gonna do that on the 13th?
the 13th will be the next vestry meeting also.
Yeah, let's combine again on the 13th.
So eliminate the vestry meeting on the 16th?
Correct.
Of April?
No matter.
We've already eliminated this.
Right.
The
I'm going down to going now.
All right, having all sorts of problems. Calendar here, but I'll get it. Okay, I just want to point out that it is 11:21. That will be our goal. Our goal will be to meet for 3 hours and to get out early. Okay?
Good.
So I will try and be as rough a taskmaster as where I want to thank Mother Lisa for playing Vanna today for her excellent
Quacking.
And so, Mother Lisa, will you say us a prayer to end this part of the meeting and then you can have the rest?
Sounds good, let us pray. Gracious Lord, we thank you for bringing us together today, for inspiring us with the future of St. Philip's and Brunswick County and the Christians who live here. Continue to remind us that in all of this strategic planning, there is room for the Holy Spirit first and foremost. Inspire us to go out and plan your will in this world as we dream for what could come next. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.